Hi everyone and welcome to my analysis of Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid. As with any analysis video, you can expect some spoilers here, so be warned. Not that there's much to spoil in this show. Anyway, let's get started. Just like any other video I'm doing, this video will use some psychological terms. In this case, I'm going to use the Jungian term of the shadow side of us. The concept of the shadow side is quite similar to Freud's idea of the id. Basically speaking, it's all of those undesired traits or monstrous traits within us, the devil within if you'd like. I'm going to use this term to explore how each of the dragon maids presented in the show represent a darker side of us, a monstrous side in us, which we perhaps are having a hard time accepting and using to our own benefit. Jung essentially claimed that one must integrate the shadow part in order to achieve a balanced life, and I believe this is true. In Western mythos, dragons generally represent the dark sides within us, the thing that the hero must vanquish in order to save the princess. But in Eastern philosophy and mythos, you generally see the dragons as a more positive force, as somewhat of a wise being that can help you. Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid, being an anime made in Japan, is of course using more of the Eastern style philosophy. But if we combine the West and the East together, we can see that we reach a very interesting whole. Not only does Miss Kobayashi use the Eastern philosophy, it also doesn't have a masculine hero. The hero in this case is a heroine, which essentially uses the dragon to her own benefit. The first important detail we learn about the Dragon Maid, in this case Toro, is that Kobayashi met her when she was very drunk. As we all know, alcohol basically lets us put out our more repressed sides, the darker sides or perhaps the shameful sides of us. It helps us loosen up, and I think what you see when Kobayashi meets Toro is that she's confronting her darker side and basically tells it, you know, you can come and be with me, I don't need to repress you so much. Thus, when Miss Kobayashi wakes up one morning to find that there's a dragon standing in her doorstep, she's automatically thinking that she can't handle this, but the dragon offers sincerely to help her. Toru just wants to be of use to Kobayashi. So what does Toru represent except for the general shadow side? I believe she's supposed to represent Kobayashi's strength and her ability to become violent. You can see that when she helps defend the apartment and generally when she just uses force to get rid of anything that is an obstacle to Kobayashi. Later in the show, Toru even shows up to Kobayashi's office using an invisibility of sorts, which kind of represents how we all hide our darker sides, and she trips off Kobayashi's mean boss. What's so great about Kobayashi as a heroine is that she's very mature and she understands her darker sides and knows how to use it to her advantage. So she's letting Toru know that she can use her abilities but only for good. You can see that in the market episode when Toru helps stop some thieves, and Kobayashi is worried that everyone around will be scared of the violence she used, but since it was used for good, everyone appreciates it. Over the course of the show, she keeps getting reminded of it, and this is very clearly to remind us, the viewer, that the darker sides of us can have great usage. As for Toru's running gag of feeding Kobayashi the tail, this is very much in reference to the Ouroboros, which is the dragon eating its own tail, which is again how the shadow side and light side are combined. The shadow side is getting eaten and swollen up by the light side, which is then again regenerating the shadow side, and so on and so forth. The next dragon we encounter is the uber kawaii Kana. This little girl is quite clearly a representation of our inner child, and while the inner child is very important, we must keep it in check, we must parent it ourselves, and we must let it develop to be part of our inner grown-up. The inner child is very playful, which is great because you want to explore the world and you want to let it run freely to some extent. But the inner child is also very whiny and very delicate, so it can't handle the world alone. It must have a mature parent within you, someone that keeps an eye, a part of you that keeps it in check, and that is what Kobayashi does towards Kana, of course with the help of Toru in this case. Throughout the show we see that Kana slowly develops and becomes more and more mature to an extent, and we see that all she really wants is to get recognition from her surroundings, be it her sort of parents in Kobayashi and Toru, or her friends. Speaking of Toru again, you can see that Toru just wants to serve Kobayashi. She wants to be of use to her. She doesn't want to just violently act out. This is explained when late in the series we see Toru's backstory, which includes a little girl who was a bandit. And the little girl bandit tells her that if she could choose what to be, instead of a bandit, she would choose to be a maid. And while the maid may serve someone else, it serves by choosing to serve. It serves out of her own choice. And so if you could choose to be just a force of chaos and evil, like a dragon naturally is in this show, or to be a maid for the forces of good and balance, clearly the better choice to be had is to be a maid. Anyway, let's get back to some of the other dragons. Personally, I think that Lukoa is not sexualized that much by accident. I think she's supposed to represent the sexual desire in each of us, and specifically, of course, she's the helper or maid of that young boy. This seems to clearly represent the fact that youth is very much a sexual thing, and it shouldn't be ignored, nor should it be repressed. Youth is fine as it is. You should be sexual, you should explore your sexuality. Then there's also Fenfir, which seems to be the representation of the shadow side of diligence. He always puts down humans and say how incompetent they are. Throughout the anime we see that the way to balance Fenfir is to play games. Thus the show teaches us that the right balance to extreme seriousness is just to be a bit more playful and take things less seriously than you would naturally. Now, while the shadow sides are great help with the outside world, overall they play best together. This is clearly shown when the dragons play dodgeball against humans, and they have to limit themselves to humans' capabilities, otherwise the game would be way too brutal for humanity's sake. But when they play together alone, they can go all out in that dodgeball game. This is when they can have the most fun, and also when we as the viewer, or you as the human letting your shadow side play, can let it go and so enjoy yourself. Another way to let loose of your shadow side without balancing it too much can be seen in the convention scene. This is where all the various monsters come from their hiding spots, and they don't have to hide anymore, they don't have to wear a maid costume or anything else, they can just let their tail loose. They can just be themselves. And this is of course shown in our real world as well, when in conventions we all go out and cosplay as whatever we want. This is where you see a lot of people put out their sexuality without shame, or just enjoy pretending to be a violent character of this sort or another. You can kind of see all of this combined in the play the dragons raise during Christmas. It's the little match girl, which is of course playing with fire, and fire is dangerous, but if you use it well, even you can make something good out of it, as seen inside the play itself when the girls burn a building down, but it helps serve the good cause in that play. Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid, generally speaking, is an easygoing show which takes itself half seriously, but not too seriously. That's all true until the finale. In the finale, Toru's father arrives, and you can see that even Kobayashi is afraid of him at some point. This is not because he's a dragon, but rather because he's the king of chaos dragons. He's some force that she cannot tame, but she must confront in order to live happily with her various dragons. While he won't accept her way of living, she doesn't have to allow him to control her. And that's essentially our darkest of darkest sides. This is where our inner monster or inner devil shows up. And of course, you have to put a limit to it. You cannot let it control you, and you cannot let it dictate how to use your darker feelings. Your darker feelings are going to be there one way or another, but if you try to push them to another dimension or ignore them, you'll never live a fulfilling life. You have to be able to dictate how your darkness is being used, and you are the one responsible for it. While the show does not delve into the dragons of order too much, it does teach us a lot about how to handle the chaos and the shadow within us. And I think Miss Kobayashi overall is playing up the part perfectly. She's a responsible adult, and you can see that she's always trying to think about how to make good use of bad things, or good use of great things even. I think that beyond the charming aesthetic and the very fun attitude that the show has, it's really deep and insightful about the human nature and how to be a really great responsible adult. I hope you enjoy listening to this analysis. Please do tell me in the comments which of the dragons was your favorite. I'm a new YouTuber, and this has been my dream for 8 years or so. So if you enjoyed any of my work so far, please subscribe and like. I really would appreciate it. And do let me know if there's any specific show you'd like me to work on, or if there's any type of analysis that you prefer. I wish you all good luck dealing with your shadows, and please don't forget, even if you can't shut out the shadows, you can always spark up the light.